a CVPR 24 part 2. I'm going to discuss just one paper in this episode. It's an interesting paper. I actually had the chance to talk to one of the authors about it. The paper is called Text to Drive, Diverse Driving Behavior Synthesis via Large Language Models. It's in the show notes for people who are interested. So the idea here is that you use large language models to generate simulation behaviors and also use large language models as a reward function. And that's really a very interesting approach. I am not a fan of it per se, and I'm going to explain why. But I think these types of papers are important because they open up the sort of the question book, right? They tell you, look, this is what we're doing, and if you disagree, tell me why. And this is exactly why I think this paper is worth discussing. So uh, let me just connect a little bit the situation here. I spoke in CVPR part 1 about the main takeaways, and one of them was the reward function designed for autonomous driving. I think Dimitri from Waymo said it in the panel that was um, coordinated by Sanya. So he said that we don't even know the reward function that well for driving, and we at Orange Capital Partners believe that that is the big breakthrough that Tesla has to offer to the community as a whole, which is the inverse reinforcement learning that they did in their stack. In other words, they looked at humans, they figured out how humans drive, and then from there inferred a reward function. This is not even on podcast. It's June 21st, 2024. This is Krim-Delco for the day. The fund is down 1%. The market is down 40 basis points. For the year, we are down 4%. The market's up 14%. We're outperforming by 18%. The market's still open. This could change. So discussing the paper, Text to Drive, it's in the show notes, the link on archive. So this paper does a couple of things. First, it uses large language models to create a simulated behavior. So it takes, let's say, a crossing and then generates a bunch of scenarios in that crossing. There's quite a bit of engineering involved here. Like, how do you turn high-level semantic information, such as one car is coming slow and then turning to the right pretty fast, another car is stopping in the middle of the road, things like that. How do you turn that into actionable representation? In other words, low-level actuator representation. So they map that, and therefore you have every situation has a high-level understanding. So let's say a human-level semantic understanding. The car is driving slow, merging onto the lane. The car is tailgating another car and then stops abruptly. Like, those are things that we humans understand, and then that is translated into car language, if you will, the language of a car, which is gas, turn left, right, brake. So that's one contribution of the paper. The other contribution of the paper is that they use large language models to generate different scenarios, right? To my left is a car, to my left is a tractor, to my left is a truck, things like that. And they use the large language model for the reward function, and this is really the key. I think my personal approach towards autonomous driving is really, I'm turning the problem into a reward function design problem. And for some people this might sound a little bit, splitting words, nomenclature, who cares? Well, it's important. Particularly when you talk to research people, I think it becomes very important, because in this case, when I spoke to Peter, I realized that they want to distill knowledge from large language models and teach a simulator how to drive. And they do that by using the knowledge of their large language model as a sort of reward function. And they have a primary reward function, an auxiliary reward function, which is another part of the model that I find interesting, because that's the problem of having sparse rewards. Let's say in the case of driving, your reward might be 1 if you can drive without intervention, but all the driving you're doing is kind of, there's not that much information here unless you get to the desired destination, then you get a 1. So how about having some auxiliary rewards, such as you drove on ramp at the right speed and you merged at the right time, so I'm going to give you partial rewards, things like that. Let me start with my main concern in this approach, which is the concept of knowledge, right? I think this is really a fundamental difference between the approach that we at Orange Capital Partners believe in, and we believe also Tesla is working with, and the approach here. And that is that there is no such thing as knowledge per se. Knowledge requires a value statement, and the value statement might or might not be accurate. In other words, if my large language model punishes a car for merging late onto a ramp because the word late implies late, it's a bad thing. That late is a value judgment that might or might not be accurate. Maybe the late is not that bad because the car has anticipated something else where that particular merger turns out to be more effective. Maybe it has just been anticipating an obstacle that somehow wasn't part of the simulation, or things like that. In other words, if I really, I guess if I think about this deeply within the model, there is a consistency in the model, because there is no such thing as late within the model. So within the model, there is a consistency. Now that I'm talking about, so again, I mean, this is canonical in every, in economics, you have people that, develop a Keynesian model and you constantly yell and scream at them because it makes no sense. But within the model, their approaches actually make sense, right? And the model is there to help you understand some fraction of reality that's what the model is. So in this case, it's the same thing. I guess within the model, merging late onto a ramp is really late onto a ramp because there are no obstacles, there are no other things. But here's what you lose, right? If you do a fully data-driven learned simulator, like for example, Ilya R suggested from Berkeley, there you're not making explicit assumptions about any kind of knowledge. And what that opens up is, in a nutshell, what that opens up to is Move 37 type opportunities, right? So you can have a car driving in a much different way than a human would drive and still do the good job. I guess this is really the philosophical maybe conversation that we're having in the community right now, which is fully data-driven, fully parallelized learning, like the Berkeley guys, like Malik, Ilya, Abil, like these people, I think are on that track, very similar to Tesla. I think Sergey also talks about inverse reinforcement learning, because what you want to do is you want to learn from data, and you even want to learn your reward function from data. Now, a large language model, in my opinion, is not the right way to learn a reward function. I think learning reward functions has to be domain specific. If I want to learn a reward function about cooking, I can't use a large language model. I think I need to learn a reward function from cooking behavior. If I want to learn a reward function driving, I need driving behavior. So at least on the behavioral side, and by the way, that's what large language models are. Large language models are writer behavior models, right? They model what writers do. They write poems or things like that, and that's that's their strength. So we should maybe stay in that realm, in the writing realm, and not use large language models for other things. Now, I want to say a couple of things. Again, the paper is interesting because it offers some engineering approaches. It offers some conceptual ideas that, again, from a model perspective are interesting. For example, having a language model iteratively improving the behavior of the agent towards the optimal behavior. I think that in itself is an interesting concept. So if we had a reward function, maybe that is geared towards, let's say, if we can have a large, maybe LBM, large behavioral model. In other words, Tesla's inverse reinforcement learning derived model of driving. And then we use a large language model to iteratively improve the agent. So instead of having expert drivers, you have a large language model that's telling the car, you did this, you did that. That's one option. I think the simulator itself is interesting, but I wouldn't use large language models for simulation. I think, in my opinion, simulation is more interesting in a like in how Ilya are presented it, which is you just want to have a lot of different, like you want to have a car on ramping, and then you just want to have a Gaussian distribution of on-ramp behaviors. Fast, build faster, build faster, build faster. Then you have the car on-ramping a little faster, a little faster, a little faster, a little bit more eyes, a little bit more eyes, a little bit more eyes. And then so like you want to start adding dimensionality, which can be done in simulation. It's compute intensive, it's difficult, it's expensive, but it can be done. I think this is the path to go. And because it's parallelizable, we can, simply, again, I mean, this always comes back to the same conversation, in my opinion, which is we can just iterate a lot more. And the more we iterate, the faster we learn. So this is why computation is so powerful, because computation allows us to explore much, much more alternatives and learn from them. So instead of having explicit knowledge imposed on the model from a large language model, let's have a data-driven simulator and then have a reward function designed also from data-driven through inverse reinforcement learning. Let's combine those two and let's learn how to drive in a simulator by having more options, more iterations, and through many more examples. Thank you.